plan a vacation, you're likely to include some sightseeing, a few fancy dinners, maybe some much-needed R&R on a sandy beach. You're probably not anticipating angry ghosts, malevolent creatures, or dark and deadly omens. But you should know that your next destination might be one that has been marked by an evil and virulent curse. So, if you're someone who likes to experience a good hex for yourself, you'll get your roadmap right here. Stick around. We may be tempting fate, but we're taking you to the world's top 10 cursed places. We start out with England's oldest and scariest prison, the Tower of London. Built more than 900 years ago, this historic slammer was the site of many gruesome and gory executions.
It's very possible that some of the people executed here have cursed the tower. One of the great things our ancestors feared was the curse of an executed person or an executed man.
Richard Jones, author of Walking Haunted London, escorts curious tourists to some of Britain's more bizarre places of interest. And because of the great number of angry ghosts that reside here, Richard says that the Tower of London corners the market on curses.
The people executed here read like a who's who of English history. They include several of Henry VIII's wives, Anne Boleyn, for example, his second wife. Catherine Howard, the youngest of his wives, was executed here. In fact, on the night of her execution, she asked for the block to be brought to her cell so she could practice putting her head up on the block in a manner befitting a queen.
The horrendous stories of the deaths that occurred here are what attracts its visitors. But it's the hideous way they died that keeps the dead hanging around.
Many ghosts are seen in the grounds of the Tower of London. Needless to say, several of them centre around executions. Perhaps the grimmest story of all of the tower's hauntings was the custodial guard who was walking around the White Tower on his night duty when suddenly he felt himself seized by the throat, and the unseen entity that was attacking him then proceeded to attempt to strangle him. Luckily, he managed to fight his way free, raced back to the guardhouse, and the bruises that he bore on his throat for the next week bore vivid testimony to what had happened to him on that night in the White Tower.
Queen Anne Boleyn is just one of the many ghosts who's cursed the tower. After failing to give her husband, King Henry VIII, a son, she was swiftly beheaded.
They wanted to make sure the job was neat, and so the headsman was brought in from France. He was a skilled swordsman who could remove a head in one fell swoop. But her ghost returned to the tower on many occasions. And on one notable occasion in the 19th century, a sentry on guard duty saw her ghost coming towards him, challenged her, then ran at her with his bayonet and went straight through the apparition. The shock of that caused him to faint clean away.
But not all the ghosts here are terrifying. There are others whose presence is more sad than scary.
Perhaps the most poignant shades to haunt the Tower of London are the two little princes, Edward and Richard.
The princes were rumored to have been murdered by their evil uncle, King Richard III, to keep them out of the royal lineage.
So their ghosts returned to the Tower of London, and are perhaps the most pathetic and poignant of all. They will stand there, weeping and shivering, and if anyone tries to assist them, they back towards the wall, and then suddenly melt into the wall and are gone.
So it's really no surprise that the Tower of London is on our list of top 10 cursed places. After all, wouldn't you seek a little revenge if one of these heinous acts had been committed against you?
When you look at those walls, if you just think of how much unhappiness has gone on behind those walls, and how many of those people whose lives ended there and whose lives became hopeless there, many of them must have looked from those walls, looked from those windows, and maybe just cursed their environment and cursed their situation.
We cross the Atlantic to our next destination, the Bird and Bottle Inn of Garrison, New York. This quaint country inn has been a popular Hudson Valley destination for over 2 centuries. In fact, one guest likes it so much, she's never left, even though she's been dead for nearly 100 years. Emily Warren Roebling is perhaps best known for supervising the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. However, those that work at the Bird and Bottle Inn are familiar with her for other unsettling reasons. Emily was a relative of the inn's original owner and often played here as a child. Although she passed away in 1903, many of the inn's employees believe she's still haunting the halls of this historical home. Jane Goldberg, marketing director for the Bird and Bottle, experienced her own creepy encounter with Emily 13 years ago. Working alone late one night, Jane was startled to hear running water coming from upstairs.
I went running through the inn, grabbed the keys, grabbed a flashlight, and I started to run through the building and up the steps, opened up the door into the room, and lo and behold, the water was gushing in the sink. No one was here. And I looked up and said, "Emily, it's so great to meet you. Thanks for visiting me."
On another occasion, Jane was hosting a cocktail party at the inn and began to tell guests about Emily's mysterious house calls. Little did she know her guests were about to experience their own close encounter with this frightening phantom.
I started to tell the new guests about Emily, and about half a second later, the bottle of champagne that was sitting next to me, the cork went flying out of the bottle. The two women I was telling the story to absolutely ran out of the room, hysterical. They were not staying for the evening. I had to run into the parking lot after them.
Guests visiting the Bird and Bottle continue to interact with Emily, whether they want to or not.
I've had guests come over to me and tell me that when they were walking up the steps, that they felt the presence of someone behind them. When something funny happens, there's Emily. We know it's her. She's done something, whether it's turning on another faucet, whether it's making sounds that nobody else knows about.
Throughout the years, the staff of the Bird and Bottle has done their best to accept these unexplainable occurrences. In fact, they've even named a room after their ghostly guest.
Many years ago, one of the former innkeepers, when they were doing the rooms over, thought that it would be a wonderful idea to name each of the rooms for the Warren family. And this being, feminine enough with the canopy bed and the romantic fireplace at the foot of the bed, they decided to call this room the Emily Warren. Of course, we nicknamed it the Emily.
The Emily Room is a favorite for Bird and Bottle guests. Visitors to the inn often request the room after hearing Emily's supernatural story. Apparently, Emily is one ghost that's good for business. When you're having a really rotten day, do you ever think there might be a voodoo doll with your name on it? Did you know there is one Major League Baseball team that can blame its losing ways on the curse of a farm animal? Stay tuned for more doomed destinations. When you think of New Orleans, Louisiana, you're likely to conjure up images of Southern hospitality, tree-lined plantations, and exquisite cuisine. But there is a darker side to this colorful city, and it's the magical world of voodoo. It has been an important part of New Orleans culture for hundreds of years.
At one time they said that the city had a black cloud hanging over it. I never believed that.
Voodoo priestesses like Antoinette, who calls herself the Voodoo Queen, insist that voodoo can be used for both blessings and curses.
It's good and bad people in that religion just like anybody else.
Creole Carol, another priestess, feels New Orleans is the perfect home for a controversial religion like voodoo.
Remember, this is the most free city in the United States. It's a very liberal city for the South. I mean, very free. I feel very free here. I'm a free spirit person. And also they let you be who you are without thinking you're crazy. Get it?
Today, priestesses can freely practice their religion, something that was forbidden hundreds of years ago when voodoo was first brought to Louisiana via African slave ships. There are many variations of voodoo, but the most common practice involves performing rituals in an effort to unleash the power of nature and the spirits of the dead. When summoned, these powers can be used for good or evil. The Hollywood portrayal of voodoo has usually involved images of zombies and pin-stuck dolls.
Maybe it was my overwrought imagination, but I'll swear that pincushion looked just like me.
But the practitioners of voodoo seek a deep connection with the spirit world, a world that they know very well.
Everyone has a dead spirit that arises up in them, that walks with them, even though they don't believe in things that is unseen. There isn't such thing as the unseen.
With the help of the unseen spirits, as well as trinkets and potions, priestesses believe that they are able to both remove and place their curses on unsuspecting victims. So love spells and hateful hexes might not be listed in your New Orleans visitor's guide. But now you know that you can find it all right here in the heart of New Orleans. You might think that the chances of an individual falling victim to a curse is pretty remote. What about an entire baseball team? For the Chicago Cubs, many believe this has been a long, sad reality. Number 7 on our list is Chicago's Wrigley Field. Throughout history, superstition has played a significant role in the lives of many athletes. Nick Newton, author of Locker Room Mojo, has witnessed for himself the sometimes irrational rituals many sports players put themselves through.
I think athletes that make it to a collegiate or pro level have enormous pressure to succeed. And the athletes can't control every aspect. There's a certain aspect of uncertainty about every contest. A lot of these athletes, in order to alleviate the pressure, will focus on something to throw up to the mojo gods or whatever in hopes of luck that will cover that will basically alleviate that so that they can concentrate on their own performance.
But as much as sports players might believe in good luck, they also believe in bad luck. So when an angered fan placed a curse directly on the Chicago Cubs and Wrigley Field, few in the world of sports were surprised to see the Cubs lose again and again and again.
There are a lot of curses in sports. My favorite curse is about the Chicago Cubs. There was a tavern owner who owned a place called the Billy Goat Tavern out on Madison Avenue in Chicago, and he was a Greek immigrant named William Sionis, and he was an avid Cubs fan. And he used to take his pet goat to an occasional game at Wrigley Field, and nobody ever said a thing.
When the Cubs made it to the World Series in 1945, the tavern owner bought a box seat for himself and the goat, as he always did. Sam Sionis is William's nephew and remembers the story well.
Well, the Billy Goat started back in 1945. My uncle, on the last game of the World Series they played here in Chicago, he had 2 tickets, one for him, one for the goat.
And he went to Wrigley Field to get in, and they wouldn't let him in. And he started throwing his arms around demanding to see P.K. Wrigley, who was the owner of the Cubs at the time. And in those days, Wrigley was accessible. They actually got him. He came down to the turnstile, and he said, "What's going on here?" And they explained he tried to bring his goat in. He said, "You can't bring your goat in here." And he demanded to know why. Why I can't bring my goat in? And he said, "Because your goat smells. It's going to offend the other customers." He said, "You can't bring your goat in here." Well, Sionis lost it. He went berserk, and he basically cursed the Cubs. The Greek, evil eye and everything else. He said the Cubs would not only lose the World Series, but they'd never be back in the World Series.
Mr. Sionis then left the ballpark with his pet goat, and the Cubs went out onto the field and played the best that they could against the Detroit Tigers. It was the 7th game of the World Series, and was by far the most important game for the Cubs since 1938, which was the last time they had been in a World Series. Between 1908 and 1945, the Cubs had been in 6 World Series, but had yet to win one. It's safe to say that it was not a good time to roll the dice on their luck. By the end of the very first inning, it was clear that the Cubs did not have fortune on their side. They had not even been up to bat and were already down 5-0.
The Tigers had no need to worry after these 5 runs scored in the first.
Throughout the course of the game, all the way to the last man at bat, the Cubs' luck did not improve.
American Leaguers are the new world champs.
So the Chicago Cubs series dreams, for 1945 at least, were over. Mr. Sionis and his odoriferous goat, it would seem, were having the last laugh. And if Mr. Wrigley, seen here in this photo, hadn't thought much of Mr. Sionis' harsh words before the game, it's likely he was giving Sionis' so-called curse some real thought after the game.
And that day, William Sionis sent P.K. Wrigley a telegram saying, "Who smells now?"
Today, Sam Sionis, an avid Cub fan, much like his uncle, does what he can to increase the Cubs' luck.
He owns a couple of goats himself, and the Cubs call him from time to time to come out and walk around the field with one of his goats, in hopes that he'll rub the curse out that his uncle put on the Cubs.
The Billy Goat Tavern remains a popular hangout for Cubs fans who truly hope there's no validity to the notion that their team might suffer from such an unfortunate and long-standing curse. But according to Major League Baseball records, there are only a few teams that have gone a 50-year stretch without making the World Series. The Cubs are, of course, one of these teams. But unlike other teams, the Cubs fans and players believe they know where to point the blame for so many years of misfortune and missed World Series opportunities. The curse of the Billy Goat, after all, is a handy explanation for Chicago's perennial bad luck. When we come back, we're taking you to a famous Missouri bed and breakfast. But may we suggest you pack your thick skin? And this road leads directly to the edge of terror, which is why we're taking it.
Don't go.
St. Louis's Gateway Arch welcomes thousands of tourists and travelers into the city's spirited old world charm. But there is one tourist attraction that might offer more spirit than any other. Lemp Mansion, now known as one of America's most cursed homes, has by all accounts had quite a penchant for misfortune. Built between 1862 and 1875, the mansion, which is now a popular bed and breakfast, began as a successful brewery.
Well, the Lemps actually were the first in this country to brew lager beer.
But the Lemp family fortune quickly dwindled when their brewery became an illegal business.
Prohibition actually closed all the breweries and all of the distillers throughout the country. There were massive layoffs, and it upset the company very much. Depressed over the sales and not happy at all with the regulation that they were suffering from the government.
The Lemps had already mourned the death of the family patriarch, William Sr., who had committed suicide in 1902 in the family home. But with the downfall of the lucrative business came a death curse that would strike the family again and again.
There were actually 4 suicides in the family between 1904 and 1949. I really believe that this house has a very ominous feel to it. And there may have been a curse. They were a very troubled and tormented family.
The Lemp family home was turned into a restaurant in 1975. But visitors found its history so fascinating, they asked for more.
We're open for dinner theater, and it turned out that a lot of people were asking about spending the night because of the house's intrigue, and we opened it in 1990.
Since then, guests have reported hearing and seeing things that make them think that the Lemps may still be residing in their turn-of-the-century home, cursing the site that led to their unfortunate fate.
It's been reported that the piano actually plays by itself. Someone walk out to the hallway, no one's sitting there, and it's not a player piano. A lot of times when the guests stay, they talk about different things that go on in the hallway, and there's a particular thing that keeps reoccurring, and it's a thud at the door, a very low kick at the door, and this happens throughout the area.
In an effort to convince their friends that they're not imagining things, some visitors will attempt to capture their experiences.
Frequently, when people spend the night, they hear things or experience things. A lot of videotape and a lot of pictures are taken revealing certain orbs and different kind of electrical energy.
Each of these odd occurrences, from the phantom piano player to the heavy foot at the door, to the mysterious sounds and images, defies a reasonable explanation, unless, of course, you're inclined to believe in curses. If being behind closed doors with a few ghosts is a little too scary for you, how about meeting them out in the open? Welcome to Clinton Road in West Milford, New Jersey.
Just anything you can imagine from your childhood nightmares seems to be reported here on this 1 10-mile stretch of road through the woods.
Mark Moran and Mark Scrimmon are the editors of Weird New Jersey, a travel guide to local legends of the state, and felt strongly about including Clinton Road, an isolated path that brave tourists can find just outside the town of West Milford.
As roads go, this one seems to encompass every area of things that frighten people. We featured a small article about it in one of our issues, and ever since then we've just been getting hundreds of letters about various things that people have encountered here.
While Clinton Road provides plenty of present-day scares, its terrifying history actually goes back hundreds of years.
Clinton Road actually is an old stagecoach stop from New Jersey to New York State.
This area was called the 5 Mile Wood, and you were warned not to go into the 5 Mile Wood after dark because the bandits would hold up in these ravines, and the sound of this rushing water would disguise your screams as they were robbing and or killing you.
It's just a very bad road, and it's always been a bad road.
Another commonly told tale is of a young boy whose spirit wants to make sure you leave the forest with all the money you brought in.
This bridge here is where you're supposed to come late at night, according to legend, and if you stop your car and throw change over the bridge into the river and you wait, the ghost is said to bring your change back up the hill.
And Clinton Road's roster of unexplained events doesn't stop there.
There are UFO sightings constantly. The apparitions range from just regular human spectral figures. God knows who's out here.
And then there's Dead Man's Curve, a 90-degree turn that has seen more than its share of victims.
It's said that all the cars that tried to take that curve too fast ended up over the bridge and into the drink. And the people that have died there, you can see their apparitions by coming here late at night.
The variety of horror stories has led Mark and Mark to form their own conclusions about Clinton Road.
There is some validity to the place being cursed.
People have come to untimely ends. There has been foul play involved. There have been deaths.
We recommend people staying away from Clinton Road only because there are forces of nature that people might not want to run into.
So, if you decide to do some exploring in the vicinity of Clinton Road, you'll do it knowing you've been warned.
Of all of the roads that we've featured, I would have to say that Clinton Road is far and away rumored to be the most cursed road we've ever encountered.
You can drive on it, but it takes a brave soul to get out and walk around in the woods.
Coming up, a diamond is a girl's best friend, unless it comes with a devastating curse. And we'll tell you how this cursed Virginian structure came to be known as Bunnyman's Bridge.
For more haunted happenings, just click on the travel channel at discovery.com.
Did you you ever inherit a family heirloom that you weren't too fond of, that you'd rather pass on to someone else? Well, here's one heirloom that has been passed around for centuries, and there might be a very good reason for that. According to the stories that follow it, this precious stone carries more than just a hefty price tag. If you were to buy this rock, you might be purchasing a bit of bad luck as well. Number 4 on our list, the Hope Diamond. Of course, it's not really for sale. Today, the brilliant Blue Hope Diamond is on display at the Smithsonian Institution's National Gem and Mineral Collection.
It's part of the legend, it's part of the fun that people have coming to see this diamond, and I've often thought we should just sell curse insurance here at the Smithsonian. It'd be a great way to make money.
Its presence here draws visitors from all over the world who are curious to know more about this mysterious stone.
The Hope Diamond is our most popular object here at the Smithsonian Institution. Each year we get approximately 8 to 9 million people visiting this diamond. Many people have heard about it. It's something they feel like they have to see, but they really don't know a lot about it when they're walking in the door.
Dr. Jeffrey Post is the museum's curator and isn't surprised by the 45.52 carat diamond's popularity.
In addition to being this large blue diamond, it is also a diamond that has a very interesting and long history associated with it.
The history of the Hope Diamond goes back to the early 1600s, when it was first owned by King Louis XIV of France. His unfortunate beheading began the legend of the curse. The hexed hand-me-down continued its curse with King George IV, who suffered devastating financial doom, forcing him to sell the stone to the Hope family, for whom the stone is named.
Lord Francis Hope has had some financial problems of his own. He was a bit of a womanizer, gambler, and so he had petitioned the courts in London a number of times to allow him to sell this diamond to pay off some of his debts.
And despite the fact that bankruptcy seemed to follow the diamond, a woman named Evelyn Walsh McLean was the next to purchase it.
She had been quoted previously as saying things like, things that were bad luck for other people were good luck for her. Her own life had been a very charmed one up to that point. And so she was now a wealthy lady. She married the son of the Washington Post newspaper. She loved jewelry.
It seemed to be Evelyn's favorite piece of jewelry, and she was often photographed wearing it. But it wouldn't be long until the curse of the Hope Diamond would strike even her.
Evelyn Walsh McLean's own life was a fairly tragic one. She had a son who was killed at an early age in a very freakish automobile accident. Her daughter committed suicide. Her husband ended up with a severe drinking problem and ended up in an insane asylum. And she herself died at a fairly early age.
After her death, in order to pay off some of her estate's debts, the diamond was sold to world-famous jeweler Harry Winston, who for about a decade put it on display with a number of other pieces that had belonged to Evelyn.
Well, all this culminated in 1958 with Harry Winston's decision to give the Hope Diamond to the people of the United States, to the Smithsonian Institution.
Or could it have been that Mr. Winston wanted to pass the diamond along before misfortune visited him as well? But as for the Smithsonian, so far, they've remained unscathed.
With the Hope Diamond coming here, that immediately focused attention on this collection, and then during the next several years, it triggered a large number of other major gifts to the collection, to the point where the collection here now, the United States National Gem Collection, is considered to be the finest public display of gemstones in the world. And so from that perspective, we've always looked at the Hope Diamond as being a tremendously good luck piece for us at the Smithsonian.
And if you're wondering how Dr. Post himself feels about the curse of the Hope Diamond...
Well, I guess I don't believe in curses, and I think the reason why this diamond has the stories associated with it are because, again, it's got a long history, and it's just a very romantic thing to attach to a diamond, these kinds of legends. But I guess it's always irresistible to try not to make a good story even better, and clearly that'll continue to happen with the Hope Diamond.
If the curse of a giant gem doesn't have you running scared, you'll want to hang around for this next one. Just on the other side of the railroad tracks in Clifton, Virginia, is Bunnyman's Bridge.
I'm a skeptic, and I don't believe what I can't see. Well, I've seen ghosts, so I believe in them.
Khalid Izzard is a psychic phenomenon expert for the Virginia Ghosts and Hauntings Research Society.
I talk to dead people.
And he knows better than anyone about a particular Virginian bridge with a history of horror.
The Curse of Bunnyman Bridge goes back quite a long way. Back in 1903, this small community that we're in now, Clifton, Virginia, had an asylum just about over there, right in their backyard.
Not too happy with the location of the hospital, the residents petitioned to have it moved, but would suffer the consequences of this decision later.
In the process of moving inmates from one asylum to the other, a bus crashed not too far from here. Most of the inmates escaped, however, shortly thereafter recaptured, except for two. Marcus Walster and Douglas Griffin were missing.
For weeks, the two escapees eluded the police, but left a hideous and gruesome trail of clues.
As authorities searched for Marcus Walster and Douglas Griffin, they found the half-eaten carcasses of bunnies strewn throughout the woods in and around this location, and that's where the name Bunnyman came from.
Then one day, the body of one of the prisoners was found hanging beneath the now-named Bunnyman's Bridge. His death was blamed on the remaining inmate, who was still at large.
In the spring of 1905, they finally called off the search for him, assuming he had either fled the area or was deceased. Later that year, the teens gathered here at the bridge for a late Halloween night celebration. Well, the next day, those three were found hanging from this bridge. And that was the beginning of the legend of the Curse of the Bunnyman Bridge. Since then, there have been several more incidents, each involving teenagers, groups of which were found here, murdered, in much the same way.
Eventually, residents and police decided to install security cameras on the bridge in an effort to keep the number of visitors to a minimum, and perhaps to also catch a glimpse of the mysterious Bunnyman.
Things have been quiet since then, but you're not going to find me here after dark, Halloween night, or any other night. But if you happen to find yourself here, you'll feel it. It's an eerie something, an echo of something from the past.
When we return, we'll show you the world's worst souvenir when we discover the curse of Madame Pele. And we'll meet a man who learned the hard way that if the sign says don't enter, don't enter. As one of the world's most popular tourist destinations, Hawaii can be a vacationer's dream come true. But if you happen to cross paths with Hawaii's Madame Pele, the mythological goddess of fire, that dream can turn into a lifetime of misfortune and doom. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park greets about 1 million visitors every year. It is here that tourists can see for themselves how these monstrous erupting mountains formed the Hawaiian island chain. The big island of Hawaii is formed entirely of volcanic rock, and living in harmony with all things natural, including rocks, is common sense to many raised on the island. But that notion is often lost to many who visit here. Intrigued by the black sand and lava rocks, many tourists decide to take a little bit of Hawaii home with them, literally.
The tourists take home rocks mainly because it's a free souvenir and it's something interesting that they can show back home that they were here, and you know how different the rocks are coming from Hawaii than coming from the mainland.
But according to the legend of Madame Pele, this is a major mistake. Possibly the biggest mistake you could ever make. As Hawaii's volcano goddess, it is Madame Pele's job to protect the land that she governs, and to punish anyone who steals from her mountains.
This story here, it says my kids accidentally brought lava rock back with them from the Big Island, and they've had lots of bad luck. The woman lost her job, and they lost a lot of money on investments, and they'd like their rocks returned back to the Big Island. That goes along with a lot of these stories here.
Dave Kell, postmaster of the Hawaii National Park Post Office, is all too familiar with letters like these. They're sent to him from all over the world by travelers who once visited the Big Island and made the big mistake of taking from Madame Pele.
Calls have come from all over the world asking, where do I return these rocks? I've had starfish from Japan. This came back from Japan. And I'm expecting some stuff from the Netherlands.
The curse of Madame Pele essentially states that if you were to take something that belongs to her, bad luck and misfortune will be sure to follow you. And the only way to rid yourself of this doom is to return what is not yours to its rightful owner.
The packages that I receive back vary from small rocks to big rocks, but I receive about 1,000 a year, I imagine.
Dave himself does not believe in the curse and thinks that it was simply a disgruntled tour guide who fabricated this fable.
There's a story that a tour bus driver made this whole thing up, that he had so many rocks on his bus when he left for the day, he got tired of cleaning them up, so he told people that, you're going to be cursed when you take these back.
But tell that to the writers of all these letters, who tell Dave Kell that ever since they brought home their souvenir lava rocks, they've been nothing but miserable. And despite the fact that Dave doesn't put a lot of stock in the curse of Madame Pele, that doesn't stop him from granting the wishes of his letter writers.
When I receive the rocks back from the mainland or wherever, Japan, I see them from all over the world. I tend to hold on to them, read the letters, wait for a day off, and I return them to the edge of the crater.
Once he accumulates a large pile of returns, Dave will make a trip out to the volcano.
Today is one of those days that I come up on my day off. It's a Saturday, and I return the rocks to where they belong.
Here he deposits the many items that have been sent to him, in the hope that it might possibly be of some relief to the senders. And with all the requests that Dave gets throughout the year, he only has one.
The funny thing about the letters I receive, I never receive letters that their luck has changed as far as, the misfortunate happenings to the people that send these rocks back. So I really don't know what happens. I hope their lives are changed. They never tell me how they're doing. I wish they would.
So if you're in Hawaii and are thinking about bringing a little lava back home with you, you might want to think again. At the very least, you might be saving yourself some future shipping charges. And our choice for the #1 cursed place in the world takes us from the lava rocks in Hawaii all the way to Luxor, Egypt, in the windswept Valley of the Kings. It is here that yet another deadly curse began, when something that should have been left alone was disrupted by human hands, forever changing the lives of all involved. In November of 1922, a British archaeologist by the name of Howard Carter made the discovery of a lifetime when he found the tomb of King Tutankhamun. But while this might be considered the most remarkable discovery of the 21st century, it might also be considered the deadliest. The astounding accomplishments of ancient Egyptians continue to captivate the modern world. Many experts believe that the extensive efforts the Egyptians put into mummification, as well as the elaborate artifacts placed inside tombs, were due to their strong belief in the afterlife. The fascination with this custom led many who were curious, as well as greedy, to excavate several pharaohs' tombs and steal much of the gold and treasures found within. After 61 tombs had already been found, Howard Carter, who had been searching for decades, finally discovered the tomb of Egypt's youngest king, King Tut, who had taken the throne in 1336 BC at the age of 9, only to die 9 years later. Carter's first find was several stone steps that he felt must lead to Tut's tomb. Subsequent digging brought him directly to Tut's front door, and ultimately inside. But perhaps Carter should have stayed outside, since the engraving on the tomb's exterior plainly spelled out, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." It didn't take long for this ominous prediction to come to fruition. Just 6 weeks after King Tut was exhumed, Lord Carnarvon, Carter's financial backer, was dead from an infected insect bite. When the mummy of King Tut was unwrapped in 1925, a wound was found on the left cheek that looked exactly like an insect bite, which is the precise location for the insect bite that took the life of Lord Carnarvon. By 1929, 11 people connected with the discovery of the tomb had died early deaths of unnatural causes. With every death, the curse of Tut's tomb was revived, and it soon became a worldwide sensation. But ironically, the one man who survived the death curse was Howard Carter himself, who died in 1939 at the age of 66. Before his death, Carter wrote in his journal that the day he broke into the burial vault was the most exciting in his life. And if you dare to, you can see the remnants of the infamous tomb for yourself. The gold coffin and artifacts are on display at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. But remember, you have been warned. So there you have it. We've given you fair warning about where not to go and what not to do. And what have we learned in the process? Well, we've learned that people usually prefer to keep their heads. That you really shouldn't take things that don't belong to you. Shiny and pretty isn't everything. And that sometimes the dead might actually have the last word. So remember these little lessons the next time you find yourself in one of the world's top 10 cursed places.
Hi, Melissa Joan Hart here, your host for Haunted Travels Week on the Travel Channel. What's thousands of years old and sports a tightly wrapped face? No, it's no aging Hollywood diva. It's a mummy. Whatever. In ancient Egypt, highly trained priests used everything from salt to sawdust to keep a body well preserved. Today, we just use Botox. Haunted Travels Week continues next only on the Travel Channel. For more